Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here this morning and wonderful to meet you. I've been told this is the fourth time that I've been asked to talk to a group like this. I had no idea. I'm expecting a medal on the fifth time. That's the only thing I can say. But I'm very glad to talk about the day after tomorrow, a subject that is very close to my heart. I did startups myself for 20 years in the technology space, and today we seem in a world where innovation is almost like an overused buzzword. But I think one of the most important things is the capacity to change. It's not about technology, it's about the capacity and maybe even more the willingness to actually fundamentally change. And I want to start with one of my favorite videos. This is one of my favorite videos of the moment. This is a Swedish documentary which was made in 1911 by a Swedish filmmaker who went to New York to capture the New World, which it was in 1911. And for some reason, this documentary was never developed. It was in a drawer somewhere. And recently, they found it and actually developed the film. And it's a 26-minute documentary, which I'm not going to show because then I only have 4 minutes left. I'm going to show you 4 seconds. So pay attention. This is New York in 1911, and what you see, and many of you have been there, this is the Flatiron Building in New York. And the entire documentary, New York is filled with horses and carriages until the magical moment when the first automobile arrives onto the scene in 1911. And this is an advertisement from 1915 by a man called Edward Klein who sells horses in New York. And he doesn't like the automobile. As a matter of fact, he hates the automobile. And he is so angry at the automobile that Ed Klein puts an advertisement in the New York Times to convince people not to buy into the hype of the automobile, but just to keep on buying horses. And after 100 years, there's only one conclusion: Ed was an idiot. But if you were there in 1911 and you owned a stable selling horses, would you have seen the potential of the automobile and turned your stable into a garage? Or would you have said, I'm going to milk this horse business for as long as I can? And I think we're exactly in one of those pivotal moments. If you see the rate of change that we have in our world today, fueled by technology, it's unparalleled. This is the introduction of the iPhone in 2007, when Steve Jobs told the audience, this is going to be your life in your pocket, the ultimate digital device. And honestly, most of us had no idea what he was talking about, but it has become, in 11 years, the ultimate digital device, our life in our pockets. This is the cover of Time magazine in October 2007, when Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone, and Time magazine put the iPhone as a cover as the best invention of the year, October 2007. This is the Forbes cover of October 2007, who put Nokia on the cover, and they said, 1 billion customers, can anyone catch the cell phone king? Same month, but a slightly different perspective. And if you had coffee earlier, and you saw one of your colleagues still using a Nokia, at least you had an opinion about that individual. And now we live in a world where we're constantly connected. We're actually we're almost afraid not to be connected. And it has this S-curve where technology especially becomes normal in a rapid rate. And it's not all good. This is one of the saddest slides that I have. You see 2 people in bed, their faces illuminated by the shining of their smartphones. And you know what the irony is? They're talking to each other. They're communicating about who's going to pick up the kids from school the next day. This is my favorite image from the last presidential election in the US, where you see how technology has become absolutely normal in record time. And we have an almost blind faith now in technology that is truly scary when you think about it. And if you look at it, this man became world famous just before the summer because Keith went on BBC Breakfast, and his job is he's an emoji translator. In this terrible world where an iOS emoji and an Android can be totally different, Keith has to make sure that calamities don't happen. I have no idea if you would go home tonight and talk to your son or daughter, and they would say, Mom, Dad, I want to be an emoji translator, if you think that's a good progress in society. But one thing is for sure, technology happens faster than ever before. And I agree, when you heard the first 3 presentations, there's a lot of fear. The media is having a field day on how technology could be threatening in many ways. And I think many people are beginning to worry maybe things are going too fast. I think we have nothing to worry about. Humans are very good at change. Only 300 years ago, we had the social revolution, which the French still call the French Revolution, but they're French. But basically, the way we run society was based on that premise, which happened only 300 years ago. 150 years ago, we had the Industrial Revolution, which basically shaped companies into organizations as we know them. And we had massive change. This is agriculture, people in agriculture, in the beginning and at the end of the Industrial Revolution. In the beginning, a country like Belgium or the Netherlands had 75% people in agriculture. At the end, less than 5%. And that happened in 100 years. And we coped. And today, we talk a lot about 4.0. I think we're on the beginning of something really new. And we're still in the very beginning. This is one of my favorite images. This is President Clinton and his faithful assistant, Al Gore, connecting a school to the internet in 1996. That's only 20 years ago. And I believe we have to be embracing the possibilities of change more than ever before. And that's a challenge for Europeans. I'm European. After 20 years of startups, I now take a lot of European executives to places where there's a lot of startup activity. It could be China, or Tel Aviv, or Berlin, or Silicon Valley. And 2 weeks ago, I was in Berlin with the board of directors of a big German insurance company. And we take these executives and show them amazing things in Silicon Valley, amazing technologies and wonderful startups. And at the end of the first day, I got messages back from the startups. And the messages said there were a lot of European questions. And this is now a phenomenon in Silicon Valley. It's Europeans like us who see new things and say, yes, but. And for some reason, we Europeans are very good at the but part. I think there is a genetic reason, because most of us Europeans come from ancestors who 300 years ago were too afraid to get onto the boat. So there's a genetic predisposition for risk averseness. And the theme of this is space. Yeah? And I love space. I mean, this was the moment of the year. When the Falcon Heavy was launched, this was wow. As an engineer, this is wow. And when it came down, it was even more spectacular. This is the image of 2018. And if you see the craziness of this man, I mean, he puts a red Tesla Roadster in a 1 million year orbit around the sun. The guy is nuts. But what if Elon worked in the European institutions? How many yes, but questions would we have thrown at him? And I think this is something which is fundamental. We live in a world where there's more change than ever before. And many of these technologies have become boring in a really record time. Social, mobile, cloud isn't special anymore. And I think what we should do is spend more time on what I call the day after tomorrow. A set of technologies that is probably going to have more impact in the next 10 years than in the last 20. And people said, you spend maybe too much time in Silicon Valley. Could be true, but I'm an engineer. I get genuinely excited about the potential. And it is wow and scary at the same time. I wrote a book a few years ago, Digital is the New Normal. But this is long gone. These are my new normals. Everything you see on this slide, cloud, agile, API, cyber, mobile, big data, social, digital marketing, is now ground zero for any company that is starting right now. Any startup, take this as the basis. This is not special, this is the new normal. But the big difference is that we're now seeing that this disruptive thing that everyone is talking about becomes almost viral. And let me illustrate that. Look at retail, look at finance, look at many markets being affected. Last year, ING, big Dutch bank, fired 7,000 people because they could not reskill them for the digital age. And the CEO, Ralph Hamers, is a smart man. He said, I don't like to fire 7,000 people, but we can't actually reskill them. And he said, the biggest problem is not the other banks, is these new players who are out to eat our lunch. Every single sector is now feeling the heat of disruption. And it is both wow and scary at the same time. Retail. If you have children, you will recognize this. The Atlantic talks about the touchscreen generation. This is my favorite Santa Claus letter of a young girl. Dear Santa, how are you? I'm good. Here is what I want for Christmas. And then the Amazon URL of what this child wants to have under the Christmas tree. And this is the new normal. I have 2 kids, 15 and 19, and they're used to the fact order before 11 o'clock, delivered the next day. Their first question when they come home from school, did my package arrive? Huh? And we're seeing that this is going to be We're just in the beginning of that. When the Amazon Go video was launched, you've all seen this, the Uberization of retail. When this came out, people said, why does Amazon do that? They're an online store. Why are they even showing the store of the future? And we figured it out in the US when last year they bought Whole Foods for $13.4 billion. Medium-sized supermarket chain, but in the inner city, affluent user base. They paid $13.4 billion. This was the reaction on the stock exchange. At that moment, their stock went up 3%. It went from a 500 billion stock to a 515 billion stock. So let me do the math. They buy Whole Foods for 13.4 billion, and the market says, well done, Amazon. Here's 15 billion, keep the change. That was a good day for Amazon. Huh? When Amazon Go finally opened in Seattle earlier this year, there were huge waiting lines in front of the store that promises no lines on the inside, which is classic nerd behavior. Huh? But Amazon is the aggressor. They're moving not just into non-food, they're getting into food, they're getting into fresh. They're opening more stores than ever before. And 2 weeks ago, I was in the US at the headquarters of Walmart. And they are in Bentonville, Arkansas. And if you've ever been there, but it has redefined my idea of the middle of nowhere. Huh? And you see the original store where Sam Walton built his first store and is now a museum. Now they have 10,000 stores. And this is why they invited me. This is shopping behavior in the US, 2007, 2018. This is Walmart, and this is Amazon. And Walmart is feeling the heat. And I spent 2 days with the top 150 on one question: what can they do against Amazon? And at the end of the first day, they showed me a Walmart of the future. Just outside of Bentonville, midnight, customers are out, robots come in to scan the aisles. And they alert their robot buddies in the warehouse who start the picking. And then an army of robots comes in, big ones, fat ones, small ones, skinny ones, who replenish the store to be ready for the first customer at 3 o'clock in the morning, 0 humans involved. And when you look at it, Walmart is the largest employer in the world. We talk about these unicorns, these tech companies. I am fascinated by companies like Walmart who have to reinvent themselves. They're phoenixes under stress. Walmart is the largest employer in the world. Walmart is the second largest organization in the world. There's only one organization bigger than Walmart, that's the Chinese army. But that's not a normal commercial company. But what is fascinating is that on the second day, we had a discussion on people. And when I asked them, what does this mean for employment? They said, if we roll out the Walmart of the future, it will reduce our workforce by 30 to 50%. And if you've been in a Walmart, the chances that we can reskill these people to become blockchain experts and AI developers is relatively small. So we're at the beginning where I think we're not just seeing the new normal, we're seeing technology changing business, and technology is changing society and is changing social. And that is a really scary and exciting moment at the same time. It always reminds me of this wonderful book by Charles Dickens, and everybody knows the opening line, best of times, worst of times. And the strange thing is, people like us are the worst to predict the future. We're technologists. Bill Gates, a really smart man, was asked to say something visionary in 1998. And he said, eventually, everyone's business card will have an email address. That was a visionary statement 20 years ago. And what happened is, it's the consumer, it's the end user who started to use technology in ways we could have never imagined that they would want to. And that is the reality. And if you want to see the progress, this is my favorite app. I would urge you, download this app. This is the KD Pro, my favorite app of the moment. You go to the App Store, you download it, and it turns your wonderful smartphone into an old disposable camera. And instead of having the full screen to take a picture, you only have this little viewfinder up there. And if you want to take a next picture, you have to turn that little wheel, and it makes the cri-cri sound that we remember. And you don't have unlimited pictures. No, you only have 24 exposures. And if you say, that's a good picture, I'm going to put it on Instagram, you can't. You have to wait 4 days for it to be developed. Huh? Then you realize the progress we're making. We're living in a world where tech is absolutely normal. I was in Italy where an Italian artist painted the logos of today onto the artifacts of the past. And where you see how things are disappearing from our life, how media is totally different, how communities work totally differently. And I love this, 2 old ladies chatting under a Twitter sign. This has become the most natural gesture for an entirely new generation. And if you thought, wow, what if this is just the beginning? I think we're at that point where there's a cocktail of technologies coming together, in my opinion, to drastically change the entire fabric of business and society. And it's a combination of factors. And this is my cocktail that I observe. It's platforms, it's information, it's intelligence and automation. And that is a very powerful recipe for one thing, acceleration. And let me start with platforms. This is a slide that I stole from Andreessen Horowitz. I do a lot of work with the venture capitalists. And he says it's now 100 times cheaper to use technology than it was in the first internet hype. And I can understand that. I started a company in '99, and I literally had to raise millions just to get started. Servers, infrastructure, software. Now, any kid with a credit card can go to Amazon Web Services, use the cloud, be up and running in 15 minutes, and have more IT power than all the IT departments of all the European banks combined. And if you're successful, we see these positive feedback loops, and it generates something we've never seen in economy, namely category kings. These category kings, Google is a great example. What's the market share of Google in Europe? 97%. Who's number 2? Nobody cares. That's category kings. And it's scary, because recently the European Commission finds, Google, Android, because 83% of the world population uses Android, because it has an unfair economic advantage. But what if this is maybe a new normal? If you look at how companies raise capital, how they use inventory, Facebook, I mean, honestly, why would I join another social network if all my friends are on Facebook? And the interesting thing about these is that we're constantly actually feeding these platforms. We are feeding the beast. They're attracting users like magnets, and we're feeding the beast. We're giving data to these platforms to make them richer. I use Waze as an example. I live in Belgium. It means you cannot drive without Waze. I mean, that's Belgium. I mean, I live in Ghent, where it's impossible to drive without Waze. And I love Waze. And I feed the beast. Every time I use Waze, I give data to the platform, which gets smarter and more intelligent, and they give me value in return. We're feeding the beast. And in the beginning, the beasts are nice and warm and cuddly, and then we feed them too much data, and then, we have to give them a 5 billion fine. Huh? And many people are saying, this is unacceptable. I mean, these companies have become too powerful. And the whole debate about the power of these platform companies, where people are saying, this is the Standard Oil Company all over again. Standard Oil Company, who had a monopoly on oil, and Rockefeller was the richest man on the planet, and then people said, no, we should shut him down. Because Google has become Standard Search Company. And Facebook has become the Standard Social Company. And Amazon, the standard commerce company. And I will tell you, it will not happen, because all of a sudden, technology, digital, has become a geopolitical game. I spent a lot of time in China. The Chinese did an amazing trick. They closed off the Chinese firewall so that Google and YouTube couldn't get in. They built their own, and they now release it onto their economic development, which is the new Silk Road. Baidu was the search engine of China. It's now the search engine of the new Silk Road. Alibaba is probably more powerful than Amazon. Look at Singles Day last weekend, just blew everybody away. And my favorite of the 3 big ones is WeChat, owned by Tencent, who has become the operating system of China. Look at payments. I mean, everybody pays with their mobile phone in China. A fruit vendor selling watermelons has a QR code. A beggar has a QR code on his cup. And everybody pays with their smartphone using WeChat or Alipay. I was in Shenzhen 2 months ago. I went to a Haagen-Dazs to get an ice cream. And I took out my credit card, and I was laughed out of the store. A credit card is an ancient payment mechanism in China. It's like going to a Carrefour here and trying to pay for my groceries with a camel or a goat. That's the equivalent of a credit card in China. And what you see is we're beginning to have a world with 2 technology stacks. There's a technology stack which is a Western technology stack, which we kind of just adopted in Europe. And there's a new technology stack coming out of the East, which is more aggressive, more disruptive, and honestly more wow and scary at the same time than anything I've ever seen. And in Europe, we're not doing enough. This is unicorns in the European space, 2017. And this is unicorns in the Silicon Valley ecosystem. This is the Chinese ecosystem. And Europe is rapidly falling behind. We need to step up our game. If you look at the top 20 internet companies in the world, 11 are US, 9 are Chinese, and from next year, it's going to be the reverse. But we need to be there. We're almost beginning to see a new Cold War between the US and China, and it's about new technologies, it's about AI, and most of all, it's about data. And what we're beginning to see is that we have an extremely negative view on some of these companies. We see them as evil because they're supplying free, and free isn't free. I mean, if you see how much money Google pays Apple just to keep the Google search as the standard free search on the iPhone, you realize that this is indeed not free. But many companies are beginning to see that this is the new normal. We have to interpret signals. We have to pick up information. And most European companies are still struggling to digitize because they're taking their old analog processes and putting that into digital. Wrong. We have to reinvent them to actually understand that digital is the new normal. But how good are you at turning information into value? How good are some of the member states of turning information into value? How good are European companies in turning information into value? And big data is a big buzzword, but it's not technology. It's much more than that. I apologize, this is a very strange example, but I'm going to give it anyway. I love this. This is the weirdest big data example I've ever seen. Every person in Hawaii in the beginning of the year got this message on their smartphone. Some civil servant in Hawaii pressed the wrong button and boom, everybody in Hawaii got this message saying there's a nuclear missile that's going to hit the island and you'll be blown to bits. That was a mistake. That was a mistake. But what would your reaction be if you saw that on your smartphone right now? This is the strangest big data analysis. This is Pornhub. This is the largest pornographic website in the world. And this is the average traffic level on the island of Hawaii on Pornhub, the moment that the missile alert comes in. What do you think happened? There was a massive 77% drop because people had other priorities. Maybe you want to call your mom and hear her voice for the last time. But the most interesting thing is 22 minutes later when people said, I still haven't seen anything, it went up like crazy. Well, that is the most beautiful example that big data is technology and psychology combined. Understanding the user is something that is crucial. But we in Europe said, very careful. Big brother, GDPR. And let's be honest, GDPR was brilliant in intent, but it failed in execution. All of us got hundreds of stupid emails. And I think between the ideal and the realization, we have to figure out how to really make trust something that lives and is valued. In a world where information commodity, trust becomes essential. And the technologies there are still very embryonic. But it becomes really interesting once we start to turn information into intelligence. And we're right there. The commissioner was right. This is probably one of the most exciting fields. And we've seen it coming. 20 years ago, Kasparov, defeated by Deep Blue. Deep Blue was built to play chess, could only play chess. And 2 years ago, when Lee Sedol, the best Go player, was defeated by DeepMind, he was very unhappy about that. But the interesting thing is DeepMind wasn't built to play Go. It taught itself how to play Go. I think this is the end of digital. Digital is done. This is the beginning of the era of cognitive. And it becomes interpreting signals. And it's about seeing it as infrastructure. This is really the new electricity. And what it boils down to is one thing: you can only train it with massive amounts of data. AI doesn't do shit if you have small data sets. And that's why these companies, these platforms realize it's a data game. And I believe, I've seen you come in, you have nothing to worry about. You're old enough. I mean, today humans are still the best computers that we can mass produce by unskilled labor. But there's a timing element to that, which is a very interesting element. And I think once we start that automation, I love the way Obama looked at that robot. It's a combination of wow and ooey at the same time. And I see weird things. This is a golf robot in Cupertino, and they've built this robot. You put it on any golf course, and it looks at the topology of the terrain of the golf course, and it looks at the wind patterns, and then does a hole-in-one on every hole, on every course. I mean, game over. Huh? I mean, the golf community was not amused when that came out. This is the Chinese newsreader that was announced last week, which is an AI and virtual reality basically reading the news. And if you look at Atlas, we've seen Atlas mature in the last 2.5 years. 2.5 years when it was introduced, it could open a door, and we said, oh, it opens a door. And then a few weeks ago, we saw this video and it's running a parkour, and then you realize the enormous speed that we're making. And the question is, are we fast enough? And as a technologist, we say, wow. But many humans out there say, what does it mean for me? And the media is having a field day. I mean, the press loves to talk about robots taking our jobs. I love what the CEO of IBM said. Maybe only 10% of the jobs will disappear, but 100% will change. And I don't think it's the factory workers at Volvo who have to fear. They're already working with robots. But people who do cognitive, repetitive jobs, that's where we're going to see the change. But we have to be mindful, because there's a gap. There's a gap between what is real and what is possible. And let me illustrate that with an advertisement. I have been haunted by this advertisement for the last 7 months. It's an advertisement for Mahabis. They are slippers for men who don't wear slippers. And I have no idea what I've done. I have no idea where I clicked on. But the internet believes I should buy a pair of Mahabis. I've been harassed by this advertisement. For the last 7 months, I cannot open my Facebook or my Instagram, Mahabis. And last week, I was so fed up, I clicked on it. And then they were out of stock. And you think, really? I mean, we've got AI beating the best Go player, and they can't even figure out when to show me an ad? How many of you have booked something on Booking.com, and once you have that apartment or that B&B or hotel in Barcelona for the next 5 weeks, all you get is ads for exactly the same hotel you've already booked? Are we overhyping technology? Maybe. Driverless cars, wow. I've been in one, it's wow. But this is my British Airways app. I do a lot of flying. I've had to enter my passport details 7 times in the last 4 months. I mean, we've got driverless cars, and BA can't remember my passport number? So are we overhyping technology? Yes, on the short term. Are we underestimating the impact on the medium long term? Most companies, again, yes. And I think this is exactly where we are. We need a better radar. We need better ways to try things and experiment. We need better ways to scale things if things move fast. I call this sense, try, and learn. And I believe if you look at IT in all of your institutions, having a better radar, a better way to test and try and experiment, and a better and faster way to scale is crucial. In a world where disruption becomes viral, and there's one thing, is that we are at the end of our linear thinking cycle. More and more we talk about VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and I don't like the man, but I love it when he said, we have more and more unknown unknowns. Rumsfeld said, you have your known knowns, you know what you know. You have your known unknowns, you know what you don't know. But more and more, we have unknown unknowns. And that means that many companies, and especially European companies, incumbents, are going to see a lot of challengers coming their way in the next couple of years. New technologies, new business models that could change the rule of the way. And this is the moment where companies say, meh. And this is the moment where they think, shit. Huh? And this is the corporate myopia. And that timing is going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. And I came up with a very simple idea called the day after tomorrow. How much time you spend on today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow. What is today? This is the 117 emails in your inbox this morning that you didn't know this morning you were going to have to deal with. And we spend a lot of time on today. That's fine. The problem is, how do you look at tomorrow? And most companies look at tomorrow by hoping that it's going to be approximately the same as today. And that's why I love this season. This is budget season. I love budgets. It's a yearly sadistic ritual that organizations undergo for no reason, where people put in fake numbers, imaginary news, into Excel, which is consolidated in something which never works. And the problem is, there's this day after tomorrow. New ideas, new technologies that could change the rule of the game. How much time you spend on today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow? Many people say 70, 20, 10. Reality, 93, 7, and 0. And the problem is value. Today, very important. Tomorrow, very important. But this is crucial in a world that is changing so fast. I wrote a book on this, and I did my first workshop with this model, and I loved it. And unfortunately, the CEO of the company was an Australian, and they're even more outspoken than the Dutch. They have a rich, colorful language. And at the end of the day, the CEO said, Mr. Hinssen, thank you very much, but your model is wrong. I said, how could this be wrong? It's a very simple model. He took a big red pen, and he went to the flip chart, and he drew that onto the flip chart. And I said, what is that? And he said, that's the shit of yesterday we have to clean up, which creates negative value. And I thought, wow. But in your organization, how much day after tomorrow and how much shit of yesterday are you cleaning up? And that balance is, in my opinion, crucial. And many people say, but we don't know. We don't know. How could we know the day after tomorrow? We don't know. And I only meet two types of people. I meet people who know what they're doing, and I meet people who don't know what they're doing. And this sounds trivial, but it's not. If I would ask you now to please stand up if professionally you have no clue what you're doing, it's not socially acceptable to stand up. Huh? But this man is the king of people who doesn't know what he's doing. He's constantly doing things that have never been done before, so by definition, he has no idea. I mean, if he says, I'm going to land a rocket vertically on a barge in the sea with 9-meter waves, there are thousands of NASA and ESA engineers saying, you can't do that. And he says, I'm going to do it anyway. Huh? And I come from the startup world, and in a startup you have 99% people who are doing things that have never been done before. And maybe 1% is a serial gray-haired entrepreneur on the board. And if that startup changes, that number changes. And if you go to Facebook now, it's 50-50. You go to Google, it's 80-20. And then I visit a bank. And in a bank, you have 99% people who know exactly what they're doing. And they've done it that way for 17 years. And sometimes when I visit some of you, it's even more pronounced than that. Huh? And challenging. But you have 1%ers, people who are trying to do things that have never been done before. And you know who your 1%ers are? I call them positive troublemakers and frustrated enthusiasts. And you know what the problem is in big organizations? Is that these 1%ers don't spend all their energy innovating. They spend most of their energy fighting the 99%. And that is the real challenge. And in that sense, I think this is not an exercise in technology or an exercise in innovation. It's an exercise in leadership. It's about figuring out how to overcome your enormous biases of all the structures we've created. And this is one of the biggest challenges. Look at this man. This man became the most horrible thing that ever happened to United Airlines when he was bloodily dragged off a United Airlines flight last year. And we've all seen it go viral. And people said, how is it possible that this happened? And 2 days after that, the CEO of United Airlines went on national TV and said, we did not provide our supervisors, managers, and individuals with the proper tools, policies, and procedures to allow them to use their common sense. Doesn't get worse than that. Often when I meet people like you say, oh, yeah, there's a lot of red tape and there's a lot of bureaucracy. You know what a bureaucrat is? A bureaucrat is somebody who says, something should be done around here. A bureaucrat is somebody who says, someone should do something. You know what the opposite it is? It's an activist. Somebody says, I'm going to do something. And I have no idea how many bureaucrats are in this room and how many activists. I have no idea how many of you spend too much time in environments that are not stimulating enough to really enable the 1%ers. And that's what we need to do. This is the resistance to new ideas. It's a function of the number of employees to the power of the number of managers. And that's why we have a lot of institutions that have org charts that are not making sense anymore. It's not technology. Thank you. And when I take these executives to these startups, they say, oh my God, they sit on wood. And they bring their dog to work. And they have meetings on the ping pong table. And more dogs. And these people go back and say, we should hire more dogs. I say, no, I don't think that's the problem. There's a fundamental shift. If you want to keep attracting the right generation of talent for this next generation, which is truly the mobile generation, we're going to have to figure out how to be relevant for this age of fluidity. We're going to need more people with the creativity and the skills to build. Today, we have too many people in the middle. We need more people with creative thinking. We need more technologists. We need more empowered organizations. governance. And I believe this is a big challenge, and most of all, it's mindset. Think about this. How much time do you spend in a crucial role in controlling your comfort zone, and how much on rethinking how to be relevant for the day after tomorrow? And I always joke with audit committees. Who are the people on the audit committee? They're by definition the most boring people in the organization. I don't want to offend anyone. You need them. I would argue every organization that has an audit committee should have a counterweight, a disruption committee, filled with people who are constantly saying, why don't we color outside of the lines? This is the worst slide in history. It's wrong. What we need to feel comfortable with is trying more, experimenting, learning from our failures, and repeating that until it really makes sense. I believe this is one of the most beautiful quotes of Mandela. I never fail. I either win or I learn. And I think this should be our guiding light in a world that is scarier than ever before, where I believe one of the challenges is not technology, but it's about the impact. And we are going to see an enormous impact, not just in your organization or in companies, but in society. Now, I'm looking at the time. Do I have 5 more minutes? Good. Then I want to do something that I've never done before. I spend most of my time on this part. Technology, changing business. But we're now seeing that technology is changing business, is changing society. And more, one of the crucial things that we have to think about is what is the we in all of this? And what is the me? What is the individual and what is the collective? Let me explain. I grew up in the Cold War. And the Cold War is very simple. I grew up in Belgium in the Cold War, and it was the Americans versus the Russians, and Europe was the battlefield. And it was all about technology. It was about nuclear, and it was about space. And what happened is in 1957, when Sputnik was launched, the Americans were scared shitless, and they created DARPA. And DARPA is still the beating heart of all the technology giants that is behind Silicon Valley. I mean, GPS, DARPA. I mean, the Google driverless car, DARPA. The internet, DARPA. And what happened in the end is that the US won because of technology. I have no idea that, when I was growing up, Reagan was the president of the US. He had a very simple, international policy. It was, we win, they lose. It was a very black and white kind of guy. Huh? But when the Berlin Wall fell, I thought, well, great, this is the operating system for the world, but it didn't. There is no new world order. And what you're beginning to see is the beginning, in my opinion, of, again, a new Cold War, but then fueled by technology. And now people are saying, hey, this is pretty scary, because all these technologies could actually rethink democracy or even capitalism, and it becomes a core question, what is the collective and what is the individual? And let me show you a book. Every year on the 1st of May, to celebrate Labor Day, I read something of a deeply red nature. And this year, on the 1st of May, I was flying home from San Francisco to Paris, and I read this book, Four Futures, by Peter Hinssen. And Peter Hinssen is a young American communist. Okay? There's not that many of them around, so it's a very rare book. Huh? And he wrote this brilliant book. Well, it's actually a really bad book, but the questions he raises are very good. And he says, are we going to go to a world of scarcity or abundance? Scarcity, I mean, we're eating up our planet. We have plastic in the ocean. We're depleting our natural resources, scarcity or abundance. When we talk about artificial intelligence and universal basic income and how technology is going to make us all a better life, a world of abundance. And the second question, is it going to be more equal or more hierarchical? And when I landed in Paris, this was the scene in Paris on the 1st of May. And it was a scene because Macron had raised the pension age by 2 years. Every technology that you're going to talk about today is going to have 10 times more societal impact than raising the pension age 2 years. And this is the result of that? What kind of a world are we going to? And he comes up, Peter Hinssen, with 4 futures. I'm not going to discuss them, but he says, he's a communist. He says the ultimate is a world of abundance and equality. And he makes a wonderful sci-fi analogy. He says Star Trek. Star Trek is the ultimate communist fantasy. We all wear the same pajamas. There is no personal property. And technology helps us. You go to the replicator, you want an Earl Grey, boom, you have an Earl Grey. And he says the opposite is what we call exterminism, a world of scarcity and hierarchy. And he takes Elysium as the wonderful mechanism to explain that. Elysium, where Matt Damon lives on the depleted Earth, and around us, in space, we have the ultra-gifted and the rich. And sometimes when I go to Silicon Valley and you see the homeless people on Market Street, and Silicon Valley is the highest concentration of tech billionaires in the world, and they can't figure out what to do with homeless. You go to Google and Facebook, where they're building their private gated communities for the rich and gifted developers. I'm not sure we're actually getting into that. And the whole discussion is, what is we and what is I? And I read weird stuff. This is the strangest stuff I've read. Marx wrote a wonderful little booklet called The Fragment of Machines, almost 100 years ago, and he said, the mind of everybody on Earth connected by social knowledge, what he calls the general intellect, that's Facebook, with information as the main productive force, that's big data and AI, could blow capitalism sky high. This is one morning, Wednesday morning, in Los Angeles, on Waze. Who do you think knows more about what really happens in the streets of LA? Waze or the municipality of Los Angeles? And this is becoming a very interesting point in time. Richard Florida said, economics and politics are out of sync, and technology is accelerating that. The big news this week is that the Japanese Minister for Cybersecurity had to admit that he's never used a computer in his life. What is our ability to trust politicians if they don't understand technology? And I love the exit interview with Obama in Wired magazine. An interview with the head of MIT Media Lab. He said, we need to have a societal conversation about the impact of technology on society, because we will have more unknown unknowns. How many politicians in Europe really understand what technology could do? How many do we have them really driving the agenda in a world where we will have more unknown unknowns? And I will end with this. The number one thing we should focus on is skills. It's about education. And it's not just reskilling the thousands of people that will be left behind in the 20th century. It's we have to figure out how we in Europe, we have brilliant education systems for the 20th century, can rethink them for the 21st. This is my favorite app. Some of you had the discussion when you were in high school, are you allowed to take your calculator to class? Huh? You come from that generation. This is MathPix, where you download the app, free app by the way, and you scan any handwritten equation, and it solves the equation for you. And not just a simple linear equation, an integral. It can go up to partial differential equations, and it solves it for you. That's a different league than, are you allowed to take your calculator to class? This is the equipment that our kids have today. But how many education systems are preparing our children for lifelong learning? Kids born today have a mathematical guarantee of becoming 100. We're going to have to prepare them for a lifelong, not of learning, but of curiosity. We're going to have to give them a chance. Our parents had the naive idea, you study until 22, that will give you enough knowledge to last until retirement. We already know we'll never retire. But think about this next generation, where we have to inspire them instead of actually make them burn out in school. I'm going to end with this. What is the kid on the left? What is he doing? Many people that I talk to say, oh, the kid on the left is cheating. I say, no. This fine young man is being prepared for the collaborative economy. That's a completely different way of living it. And I think it's not just your role to build the infrastructure for Europe. It's your role, I think, to also give us some inspiration and to enable Europe to actually make a chance in this world that I think we absolutely have to step up our game to make it in the day after tomorrow. I wish you a lot of success. Thank you very much.